You woke up this morning. You are reading this right now. Every single ancestor you have ever had survived long enough to pass life forward to the next one in an unbroken chain stretching back tens of thousands of years. That chain almost snapped. Not once, at least 5 separate times. The entire human story came within a hair of simply stopping, and most people have never heard about a single one of them. So let's start at the beginning, long before history was even being written down. Around 74,000 years ago, on the island we now call Sumatra, a mountain didn't just erupt, it detonated. The eruption of Lake Toba was one of the largest in the last 2 million years, blasting thousands of cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the sky. The ash spread across India, across the Indian Ocean, across the Arabian Sea. In some places it fell several meters deep. Now imagine the sky filling with that ash. Imagine the sun fading to a dull smear for years on end, the temperature dropping, the plants dying, the animals starving. That is what some scientists believe happened next. Here is where it gets stranger. An anthropologist named Stanley Ambrose, working at the University of Illinois, noticed something odd hidden inside human DNA. Our species is genetically far less diverse than it should be. In fact, 2 chimpanzees from the same forest can be more genetically different from each other than 2 humans from opposite sides of the planet. It is almost as if, at some point in our past, nearly all of us vanished. Ambrose proposed a chilling explanation. He suggested that Toba's eruption plunged the world into a volcanic winter so brutal that the human population collapsed to just a few thousand individuals, maybe fewer. Everyone alive today, by that theory, descends from that tiny, shivering band of survivors. Now, scientists still argue about Toba. Some archaeologists digging in India and South Africa have found signs that humans carried on through the disaster more easily than the theory suggests. But the genetic puzzle has never fully gone away. Why are we so alike? Why does our DNA look like the DNA of people who lived through something catastrophic? You may quite literally be the descendant of a near extinction. And that was only the first time. Now move forward, a long way forward. The year's 536. You're alive somewhere in Europe, or Asia, or the Middle East, and one morning the sun comes up wrong. It is there, but it is dim, pale. It casts almost no heat, more like a blue moon than a star, hanging where the sun should be. And this is not one strange morning, it lasts 18 months. A Byzantine historian named Procopius lived through it and wrote it down. He recorded that the sun gave its light without brightness, and that people lived in dread of what it meant. He was right to be afraid. Crops failed across continents. Snow fell in summer in China. Temperatures across the northern hemisphere crashed and simply refused to recover. A Harvard historian named Michael McCormick has studied this period in enormous detail, and he has described 536 as the start of one of the worst times in all of history to be alive. Worse than the fall of Rome. Worse in many ways than any single plague year that came before it. But what actually caused it? For centuries, nobody knew. Then researchers found a way to read the past directly. They pulled long cylinders of ancient ice out of glaciers and studied them like the rings of a tree, layer by frozen layer. A scientist named Ulf Büntgen and his colleagues found the unmistakable fingerprint of a colossal volcanic eruption, throwing a veil of sulfur and ash right across the planet. And it did not stop there. Another massive eruption struck a few years later, then another. And into that frozen, sunless, starving world came something even worse. A disease we now call the Plague of Justinian swept through the survivors, and it may have killed a third of the people it reached. So ask yourself this: how close did civilization come to ending in the 6th century, with no sun, no harvest, and a plague tearing through whatever was left? Far closer than you were ever taught. But the deadliest blow of all was still coming, and this time we have the records to prove it. In the year 1347, ships began arriving at the ports of the Mediterranean carrying sailors who were already dying. Their bodies were swollen with black lumps. Many were dead within days of the first symptoms appearing. The disease moved faster than any warning could travel, leaping from town to town, from country to country, outrunning every attempt to escape it. It was the Black Death. And over the next 4 years, it did something that is almost impossible to truly imagine. A historian named Ole Benedictow spent much of his career counting the dead from old records, parish by parish, region by region. His estimate is staggering. He concluded that roughly 60% of the entire population of Europe died in less than 5 years. Not 60% of a single town, 60% of a continent. Entire villages were wiped out completely, leaving empty houses and untended fields. In some places, there were not enough living people left to bury the dead. People genuinely believed they were witnessing the end of the world, and honestly, can you blame them? If you watched more than half of everyone you had ever known die in a single season, what else would you possibly think? And here's the part that should truly unsettle you. Humanity did not survive the Black Death because of medicine. There was no cure. There was no understanding of germs at all. Nobody knew that fleas living on rats were carrying a bacterium we now call Yersinia pestis. There was no plan, no treatment, no hospital that could help. We survived through nothing more than brute luck and sheer numbers. The plague burned through the human race, and just enough people happened to be immune, or lucky, or isolated, to live. That is the entire reason the species continued. That is the entire reason you are here reading this. Now jump forward again, all the way to a single day. Quite possibly the single most dangerous day in all of human history. And this time, the world almost ended not because of a volcano or a virus, but because of one man, in one room, deciding whether to say yes or no. It is October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. American warships are hunting and dropping depth charges on a Soviet submarine hiding deep in the Atlantic. What the Americans do not realize is that this submarine, designated B-59, is secretly armed with a nuclear torpedo. Inside, the situation is a nightmare. The air conditioning has failed. The temperature has climbed past 50 degrees. Crew members are fainting from the heat and the lack of oxygen. The captain has been cut off from Moscow for days and has no idea what is happening on the surface. As the explosions hammer against the hull, he becomes convinced that war has already begun above them, so he gives the order to arm the nuclear weapon and fire it. But there is a rule aboard that particular submarine. 3 senior officers must all agree before the nuclear torpedo can be launched. 2 of them say yes. The third is a man named Vasili Arkhipov. And he says no. He refuses. He argues against it, holding his ground inside a boiling steel tube at the bottom of the ocean, while the men around him believe they are all about to die anyway. Because of his refusal, the torpedo is never launched. A historian named Thomas Blanton, who later studied these events closely, stated it as plainly as it can be stated. He said that a man named Arkhipov saved the world. Sit with that for a moment. You are alive, your family exists, your entire world continues, because one Soviet officer, whose name you were probably never taught, chose restraint in the worst imaginable moment. How many times has the future of every single person on Earth quietly balanced on a decision like that? And now the 5th one, because the 5th one is different. The 5th one is not really over, it is waiting. In September 1859, a British astronomer named Richard Carrington was quietly sketching dark spots on the surface of the sun when he saw something no one had ever recorded before. 2 brilliant beads of intense white light suddenly erupted across the sun's surface. He had just witnessed the most powerful solar flare ever documented. About a day later, the storm it unleashed slammed into the Earth. The night skies lit up with shimmering auroras so bright that people in the Caribbean could reportedly read a newspaper by their glow at midnight. Birds began singing in the small hours, fooled into thinking dawn had arrived. And the telegraph network, the only electrical system on the entire planet at the time, went completely haywire. Wires threw sparks. Operators were shocked at their desks. Some machines kept transmitting messages even after being disconnected, running on the raw electricity pouring out of the sky itself. In 1859, all of this was mostly a strange and beautiful curiosity, because the world barely depended on electricity. But here's the thought that should genuinely stop you cold. Imagine that exact same solar storm arriving today. Think about your phone, the power grid, the satellites guiding planes and tracking weather, the water systems, the hospitals, the banks. Almost everything you rely on, every single hour of every single day, runs on precisely the kind of technology a Carrington-level storm is capable of destroying. And this is not science fiction. In 2012, a solar storm of similar power erupted from the sun and crossed Earth's orbit. It missed us by a matter of days. Scientists know with complete certainty that another one will eventually strike us directly. They simply do not know when. So tonight, when you reach over and switch on a light without a second thought, remember that it depends entirely on the sun choosing to stay calm. And how long will it? So there it is, 5 times. A volcano that may have nearly erased us before history had even begun. A sunless year that froze and starved half the known world. A plague that emptied an entire continent in less time than it takes to finish school. A single man sweating in a submarine, refusing to end everything, and a storm still circling silently above your head, waiting for a day no one has marked on any calendar. 5 times the human story should have quietly ended. And 5 times, through luck, through stubbornness, through one person's quiet courage, it simply refused to. You woke up this morning. You are reading this right now. And the only reason either of those things is true is that at least 5 separate times, against absolutely everything the story refused to end,